hey, let's take a look at versions a little bit more in depth. So I have my original image and I can edit it multiple different ways, and it's non-destructive. But if I want to save different versions of that to hop back and forth for one reason or another, I want to save those different crops, styles, looks, edits as versions. So this is what my original photograph looked like. And I can always go back to my original. I edited it the first time, and this is what it looked like. I used the Artistic 07 profile. I did a basic edit on it. I really liked how it looked, kind of old school, but I wasn't 100% satisfied. And if you guys might know, I do like a square crop. But I also like the 16:9 crop. Actually, I like all crops for different reasons. But this one, I had so much space in the foreground. I kind of played with a linear edit. Selective edit. It didn't really work. It was too dramatic, too dark. So then I came in and I recropped it. Now, the problem with this crop is that I cropped a lot of the image out of it to make this the way it looks. So I would have done better to get a little bit closer when I was making the image. Now, here's the fun thing. I can always revisit this. Maybe those cars will be in the same place and I could make the image again. But in the end, I really like this crop. I really like the color that I used here, kind of muted, really kind of playing with that baby blue. Everything else is kind of getting washed out, but there's still detail. So this is where I ended up. But let me show you how to do another edit and another crop. So I'm going to go back to my original, and I can click on these. I can click here. This was my original. This time, I'm going to start off by cropping it again. And remember, I can come up here, and I'm going to pick a 4:5 crop. Do I like that? That's kind of working. I can tighten it up a little bit. Now, notice this crop. I'm not cropping off a ton of information. I'm cropping off some. I'll still be able to print this pretty large. When I'm cropping, I'm thinking about the front of the car here. I'm thinking about the steering wheel here. I'm thinking about the Elvis sign here. So that looks pretty good. I'm going to click over here to the light panel, and I'm going to hop into some presets. Which one do I want? I don't even know. I should have thought this out a little bit more. There's that saturated color I liked earlier that I had modified. Let's see, warm contrast, flat and green. Kind of like that one. Okay, so we're going to use red lift matte. And I want to write that down so I remember what it is later. Red lift matte. I'm going to come back here to my light panel, and I'm going to push down the darks. I'm going to brighten up those highlights a little bit, brighten up the whites. I'm just going to really kind of play here. I didn't really want those shadows down at the bottom, so I want to be careful not to lose too much shadow. So I ended up with a little bit plus there. Contrast can do this. When I pull down the contrast, we lose the dark. When I push up the contrast, we get more. So I'm just going to leave this kind of right where it is, and I'm going to actually play with the exposure a little bit, push it up. I kind of like that brighter washed out look from earlier. So that's looking pretty good. If I come down here to effects, we can add a little bit of texture. That's looking good. And let's see here. What else did I want to do? The vignette. That's what I wanted. It was hanging out here with the texture. So I added a little bit. Now remember, we have this drop down here, so we actually have more control, so we can see how large that is, what the roundness is. That's looking pretty good, and I think I'll add some grain. Also, we got a drop down for the grain, so I can change the size. When I'm looking at the grain, I'm going to take it up to 100% so I can actually see the grain. So I want that a little bigger. I think I want that grain a little bit chunkier. I don't want it so chunky that it takes over the picture. That happens a lot of times. So I just want to be able to see a slight hint to make me think of the film days. Okay, so that's looking pretty good. And I'm going to go back to fit. So now I'm going to come over here to where it says versions, and I'm going to click on that, and I'm going to create a new version. And I'm going to call it red matte lift. So I know what preset I used. I'm going to say I used the basics panel, and I did a vignette and some grain. I think that's everything I did. If I think of something in a minute that I missed, what can I do? I can go back and I can rename it. So I just hit create. Now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 edits right here as different versions. I can also then, let's say this is the one I really like, I can click on this and I can come up here and I can export it as the original. So as the DNG with all these settings tied to it, or as a JPEG, depending on what we want to use it for. JPEG large. We never want the small. Okay, so hopefully that helps, gives you a little bit better clue on what you can do with versions. So go have some fun. Make 5 million. Okay, well, at least make 4 or 8.